What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 8th, 2026, about 9 p.m. where I'm at right now, and we are continuing our 18th book in our Book to React series. This is episode 8 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panther Party, alongside Bobby Seale in Oakland, California, even though Huey P. was born in Monroe, Louisiana, my hometown as well. We're running 2 live streams at the same time, so you can watch this on the first live stream where I do it the old school way, where you can see the book on the page. And we also have the vertical stream going as well, where the people can join in. I will be reading comments from both sides. I have both live stream chats open. So if you have anything that you want to say to me, say it with your chest, and I will be giving shout outs to everybody who joins the live stream. So shout out to Javen Schonenbaum, shout out to him as well in the live stream chat. And for today's reading, we will be doing part 4. We will be reading 4 chapters from part 4 of Revolutionary Suicide. Those are chapters 22, Raising Consciousness, chapter 23, Crisis, October 28th, 1967, chapter 24, Aftermath, and finally, chapter 25, Strategy. It's going to be a quite long read. We might be on live for about an hour and a half, knocking these chapters out. But without further ado, let's get into it. Part 4 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. And one more time, shout out to Jevin Schonenbaum up in the chat. Part 4. Black men and women who refuse to live under oppression are dangerous to white society because they become symbols of hope to their brothers and sisters, inspiring them to follow their example. Chapter 22. The mobilization of the masses, when it arises out of the war of liberation, introduces into each man's consciousness the ideas of a common cause, of a national destiny, and of a collective history. In the same way, the second phase, that of building up the nation, is helped on by the existence of this cement, which has been mixed with blood and anger. Frantz Fanon in The Wretched of the Earth. We have to read The Wretched of the Earth someday, sometime. Anyway, shout out to Alex Wagoo in the chat. Shout out to Edward Mismas in the chat, and shout out to Alex Wigoo as well. Continuing here, we're on chapter 22 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. Nomo, Swahili for the power of the word. Nomo. Chapter 22, Raising Consciousness. The Black Panthers have always emphasized action over rhetoric, but language, the power of the word in the philosophical sense, is not underestimated in our ideology. We recognize the significance of words in the struggle for liberation, not only in the media and in conversations with people on the block, but in the important area of raising consciousness. Words are another way of defining phenomenon, and the definition of any phenomenon is the first step to controlling it or being controlled by it. When I read Nietzsche's The Will to Power, I learned much from a number of his philosophical insights. Leftists who read Nietzsche always end up doing great things. I repeat, leftists who read Nietzsche always end up doing great things. This is not to say that I endorse all of Nietzsche, only that many of his ideas have influenced my thinking. Because Nietzsche was writing about concepts fundamental to all men, and particularly about the meaning of power, some of his ideas are pertinent to the way Black people live in the United States. They have had a great impact on the development of the Black Panther philosophy. Nietzsche believed that beyond good and evil is the will to power. In other words, good and evil are labels for a phenomenon or value judgments. Behind these value judgments is the will to power, which causes man to view phenomenon as good or evil. It is really the will to power that controls our understanding of something and not an inherent quality of good or evil. Man attempts to define phenomenon in such a way that they reflect the interests of his own class or group. He gives titles or values to phenomenon according to what he sees as beneficial, if it is so to his advantage. Something is called good, and if it is not beneficial, then it is defined as evil. Nietzsche shows how this reasoning was used by the German ruling class or the German ruling circle, which always define phenomenon in terms of complementary to the noble class. For example, they use the German word gut, which means godlike or good, to refer to themselves. Nobles were gut or gut, maybe it's pronounced gut, which means godlike. On the other hand, the word villain, used to describe the poor people and serfs who lived outside the great gates of the nobleman's home, suggested the opposite. The poor were said to live in the village, a word that comes from the same root word, Latin villa, as the term villain. So the ruling class, by the power they possessed, defined themselves as godlike and called the people villains or enemies of the ruling class. Needless to say, when the poor and common people internalized these ideas, they felt inferior, guilty, and ashamed, while the nobles took their superiority for granted. Thought had been shaped by language. Think about that. So the meaning of the word villain is those who live in the villa, similar to how the word peon means those who are so poor they can get peed on, as my father told me. But think about that. Rich people back in the day in Germany called themselves gut, as in godlike or good, and the people who lived outside of the gates in the villas were villains, meaning like the enemies, right? Which is very interesting now because rich people now all have villas and poor people now have to live in the gates of the city walls. Oh, how things have switched, but still somehow remain the same. Giving a shout out to everybody up in the comment section. Shout out to Shaquarius Johnson. Shout out to Jevin Schonenbaum. And shout out to everybody else up in the chat supporting us reading Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, one of the great founders of the Black Panther Party, one of our ancestors. Continuing here, we have seen the same thing in the United States, where over a period of time, the adjective black became a potent word in the American language, pejorative in every sense. We were made to feel ashamed and guilty because of our biological characteristics, while our oppressors, through their whiteness, felt noble and uplifted. In the past few years, however, and it has only been a few years, the rising level of consciousness within our Black communities has led us to redefine ourselves. People once ashamed to be called Black now gladly accept the label, and our biological characteristics are sources of pride. Today we call ourselves Black people and wear natural hairstyles because we have changed the definition of the word Black. This is an example of Nietzsche's theory that beyond good and evil is the will to power. Or I think also Foucault called this the power to define. If you have the power is having the ability to define. I think that's also from Foucault or Adorno. But it's very interesting. Think about if 1,000 years from now, or maybe even sooner, who knows, the rich people are all Black and the poor people are called white. Or being good is called you are being Black in your character, and being bad is called you have a white heart. You know what I'm saying? Who knows what language might evolve into, how cultures might change. Who knows what it might be. But giving a shout out to Kevin French up in the chat, and shout out to Brianna up in the chat. She asked, what's my favorite color? My favorite color to wear is yellow or gold. My favorite color to look at, I would say in general, is purple, like a dark purple like my tie. Very good question. All right. No speed limit says, are you an attorney? I wish. Continuing here. So in the early days of the Black Panthers, we tried to find ways to make this theory work in the best interest of Black people. Words could be used not only to make Blacks more proud, but to make whites question and even reject concepts they had always unthinkingly accepted. One more time. Words could be used not only to make Blacks more proud, but to make whites question and even reject concepts they had always unthinkingly accepted. One of our prime needs was a new definition for policeman. A good descriptive word, one the community would accept and use, would not only advance Black consciousness, but in effect control the police by making them see themselves in a new light. We thought up new terms for them. At first, I figured that the reverse of God, dog, would be a good epithet, but it did not catch on. We tried beast, brute, and animal, but none of them captured the essential quality we were trying to convey. One day, while working on the paper, Eldridge showed us a postcard from Beverly Axelrod. On the front was the slogan, "Supports your local police." There was a sheriff's star above the phrase, and in the center of the star, a grinning, slobbering pig. It was just what we were looking for. We began to show policemen as pigs in our cartoons, and from time to time use the word. Pig caught on. It entered the language. So once again, you know my favorite slogan on this channel, fuck the police. Fuck the police. Fuck all police. All police are bastards. All police are pigs. And yes, shout out to Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party for bringing us this phrase, adding it into our lexicon. Fuck all police. All police are pigs. I wish they thought of an acronym too. Police instigates, I don't know, grandiose savagery or something like that. Police instigate grandiose savagery or something more clever than that. But yeah, shout out to Quincess up in the chat. She says, or he says hello. Shout out to Quincess and everybody else joining the live stream. Continuing here. So, this was a form of psychological warfare. It raised the consciousness of the people and also inflicted a new consciousness on the ruling circle. If whites and police became caught up in this new awareness, they would soon defect from their own ranks and join us to avoid feelings of guilt and shame. Nietzsche pointed out that this tactic had been used to good effect by the Christians against the Romans. In the beginning, the Christians were weak, but they understood how to make the philosophy of a weak group work for them. By using phrases like "the meek shall inherit the earth," they imposed a new idea on the Romans, one that gave rise to doubt and led to defections to the new sect. Once Christians stated that the meek shall inherit the earth and won over members, they weakened the strength of those in power. They were to be the victors. People like to be on the winning side. We have seen the same principle work on college campuses in this country. Many white youths now identify with blacks. The identification is manifested in clothes, rhetoric, and lifestyles. Thus, even though we came to the term pig accidentally, the choice itself was calculated. Pig was perfect for several reasons. First of all, words like swine, hog, sow, and pig have always had unpleasant connotations. The reason for this probably has theological roots, since the pig is considered an unclean animal in Semitic religions. In the English language, well-established pig epithets are numerous. We say that someone eats like a hog, is a filthy swine, and so on. In Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, James Joyce uses swine as a destructive, devouring image when he describes Ireland as an old sow that eats her farrow. So the word pig is traditionally associated with grotesque qualities, just like the police, who are all pigs. Shout out to Kevin Astola up in the chat, and shout out to everybody else up in the chat as well. So, the pig, in reality, is an ugly and offensive animal. It likes to root around in the mud. It makes hideous noise. It does not seem to relate to humans as other animals do. Further, anyone in the black community can relate. Anyone in the black community can relate to the true characteristics of the pig because most of us come from rural backgrounds and have observed the nature of pigs. Many of the police, too, are hired right out of the South and are familiar with the behavior of pigs. They know exactly what the word implies. To call a policeman a pig conveys the idea of someone gross and uncaring. And for anybody out there who is, back the blue or pro-police, basically you love licking boots, remember, Huey P. Newton is writing this in the early 70s, where until maybe the late 80s, it was very common for police in America to handcuff and arrest young black men and call them all sorts of racial slurs in the back of police cars and abuse them in the interrogation rooms while saying all types of negative words to them. The N-word is just the bare minimum, scratching the surface. Imagine getting beat up by two big policemen and they're calling you everything but a child of God because of your blackness. And Huey P is saying we're going to call the police pigs. You get what I'm saying? So Shout out once again to Huey P for calling the devil by his name. Pig has another point in its favor. In racial terms, pig is a neutral word. Many white youths on college campuses began to understand that or what the police were really like when their heads were broken open during demonstrations against the draft in the Vietnam War. This broadened the use of the term and served to unify the victims against their oppressors. Even though white youths were not victimized in the same way or to the same extent that we were, they nonetheless became our allies against the police. In this case, the ruling class was not able to set the victims against each other, as the racists in the South had done by setting poor whites against blacks. All right. Shout out to everybody up in the chat. I gotta fix the camera real quick. Okay. Shout out to Corn Plum 80. Shout out to Nick. Shout out to KC. And yeah, shout out to everybody else up in the comment section. All right. So our greatest victory, however, lay in the effect of the police themselves. They did not like to be called pigs, and they still do not. Ever since the term came into use, they have conducted a counter campaign by using slogans like "pigs are beautiful" and wearing pigs are beautiful and wearing pig pins, but their effort has failed. Our message, of course, is that they do not want to be pigs, then they ought to stop their brutalization of the victims of the world. No slogan will change the people's opinion. A change in behavior is the only thing that will do it. Okay? So, hold on one second. Hold on one second. We have to, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put this person in timeout because while you might disagree with my very correct politics, or you don't like reading because you're a right-winger, what we're not going to do is racially abuse black people on my channel, okay? None of that. None of that. All other jokes, all other things are okay, but racially abusing black people, that will get you blocked, okay? Don't think because I'm not reading your comments out loud doesn't mean I'm not seeing what you're saying. All white supremacists, you have no business being on this channel. You have no business existing in society, okay? And if I could snap my fingers, all of you would be decapitated instantly. And that only includes white supremacists and anti-black racists, okay? So just because I'm not reading it out loud doesn't mean I am not saying it. And I will use the power that YouTube has invested in me to get your ass out of here, okay? All right, so shout out to ASO, I can't pronounce that. Ben Weka. Shout out to Ben Weka up in the chat for leaving comments. We're going to continue here. So basically, the police didn't like being called pigs, and they tried to reverse engineer the term. Continuing here. So another expression that helped to raise black people's consciousness is all power to the people. An expression that has meaning on several levels: political, economical, and metaphysical. It was coined by the Black Panther Party around the same time as pig and has also gained wide acceptance. When we created it, I had in mind some distinct philosophical goals for the community that many people did not understand. The police and the press wanted everyone to believe that we were nothing more than a bunch of young toughs strutting around with guns in order to shock people. But Bobby and I always had a clear understanding of what we wanted to do. We wanted to give the community a wide variety of needed programs. And so we began in a way that would gain the community's support. At the same time, we saw the necessity of going beyond these first steps. In developing our newspaper, we were working toward our long-range goals of organizing the community around programs that the people would come to believe in strongly. We hoped these programs would come to mean so much that the people would take up guns for defense against any maneuvers by the oppressor. So, this is the thing. The Black Panthers started these survival programs, which are things like the free breakfast program they were famous for, and carried around the guns, they didn't carry around the guns so that people support them to continue to carry around guns and act like, paramilitary forces in America. But really, they were doing the survival programs and showing people, if you want to protect what the community can do for you, you also have to arm up. You also have to carry the gun. Think about this. Think about what Huey is saying right here. We hoped these survival programs, the community resource programs that they were providing for people, would come to mean so much that the people would take up guns for defense against any maneuvers by the oppressor to take away those programs from them. Very, very powerful. And I don't think a lot of people consider that when they're evaluating the Black Panther Party, their legacy, their history, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why we read these books, so that we can learn more. Shout out to Zilla up in the chat. Shout out to Ninja Code in the chat as well, and everybody else who is joining the live stream. Let's continue here. So all these programs were aimed at one goal: complete control of the institutions in the community. Every ethnic group has particular needs they know and understand better than anybody else. Each group is the best judge of how its institutions ought to affect the lives of its members. Throughout American history, ethnic groups like the Irish and Italians have established organizations and institutions within their own communities. When they achieved this political control, they had the power to deal with their problems. Yet there still is another necessary step. In the Black community, mere control of our own institutions will not automatically solve problems. For one thing, it is difficult to get enough places of work in the community to produce full employment for Blacks. The most important element in controlling our own institutions will be to organize them into cooperatives, which would end all forms of exploitation. Then the profits or surplus from the cooperatives would be returned to the community, expanding opportunities on all levels and enriching life. Beyond this, our ultimate aim is to have various ethnic communities cooperating in a spirit of mutual aid rather than competing. In this way, all communities will be allied in a common purpose through the major social, economic, and political institutions in the country. So once again, Huey P. Newton is attacking Black capitalism. There's some people out there who honestly believe they can parade around like Black Panthers, that they can wear the black berets and the black leather jackets and the black gloves and the shotguns in their hand, and then say, brother, we need to start up an LLC. Brother, we need to start, selling veneers. You know what I'm saying? Like, just crazy shit. People start believing in Black capitalism, the power of the black dollar, and all that sort of stuff. And here Huey P. Newton is laying it out clear. In 1972 is no different than 2026. The communities that we live in as Black people are incapable of providing full Black employment. It's impossible. And even if they were able to do full Black employment, it would be exploitative labor, because the capital that is produced from these companies does not go and evenly distributed amongst the people in the community. You get what I'm saying? So that is the problem. And Huey P. Newton is expertly pointing this out. So, continuing here in Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide, Chapter 22. This is our long-range objective. Although we are far from realizing it, it is important that the people understand that what we want for them and what are indeed their natural rights. I repeat, although we are far from realizing it, it is important that the people understand what we want for them and what are indeed their natural rights. Therefore, the slogan, "All Power to the People," sums up our goals for Black people, as well as our deep love and commitment to them. All power comes from the people, and all power must ultimately be vested in them. Anything else is theft. Our complete faith is in the people. Our complete faith in the people is based on our assumptions about what they require and deserve. The first of these is honesty. When it became apparent in the early days that the Black Panthers were a growing force, some people urged us to take either accommodating positions for small gains or a black line based solely on race, rather than economic or social strategy. These people were talking a black game they did not really believe in, but they saw that the people believed and that the black line could be used to mobilize them. We resisted. To us, it was both wrong and futile to deceive the people. Eventually, we would have to answer to them. In the metaphysical sense, we base the expression "all power to the people" on the idea of man as God. I have no other God but man, and I firmly believe that man is the highest or chief good. If you are obliged or obligated to be true and honest to anyone, it is to your God. And if each man is God, then you must be true to him. If you believe that man is the ultimate being, then you will act according to your belief. I wish I read this when I was 16 or 17, when I was like a 5%er. You know what I'm saying? When I was studying my 120 lessons and all that, because that would have took me over the edge. You know what I'm saying? Huey P. Newton says in his own book, man is God, and then I would extrapolate it towards the black man is God and everything else the 5%ers believe. That would have been ill. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to continue here. That's just dope. But it's kind of interesting how out of nowhere in part 4 we're going very metaphysical, very philosophical, in what so far has been a very grounded memoir. But now Huey is talking about theory and philosophy, and it's very interesting. He's going in this direction. Continuing here. So, I have no other God but man, and I firmly believe that man is the highest or chief good. If you are obligated to be true and honest to anyone, it is to your God. And if each man is God, then you must be true to him. If you believe that man is the ultimate being, then you will act according to your belief. Your attitude and behavior toward man is a kind of religion in itself, with high standards of responsibility. It was especially important to me that I explored the Judeo-Christian concept of God, because historically that concept has had an enormous impact on the lives of black people in America. Their acceptance of the Judeo-Christian God and religion has always meant submission and an emphasis on the rewards of the life hereafter as relief for the suffering of the present. Christianity began as a religion for the outcast and oppressed. While the early Christians succeeded in undermining the authority and confidence of their rulers and rising up out of slavery, the Afro-American experience has been just the opposite. Already a people in slavery, when Christianity was imposed upon them, the blacks only assumed another burden, the tyranny of the future, the hope of heaven and fear of hell. Christianity increased their sense of hopelessness. It also projected the idea of salvation and happiness into the afterlife, where God would reward them for all their sufferings on this earth. Justice would come later in the promised land, so they say. All right. Shout out to everybody up in the comments. Shout out to Looking Glass. Shout out to The Wizard. Shout out to Zilla. Shout out to everybody up in the comments who is making a lot of noise. I appreciate this. I appreciate the conversation right now. I appreciate all the people doing the engagement. Shout out to all of you. Shout out to Zilla. Shout out to Looking Glass, everybody else. All right, continuing here. Revolutionary Suicide, Chapter 22, Huey P. Newton's memoir. So the phrase, all power to the people, was meant to turn this around, meaning people's belief in a hereafter, God, heaven, hell, all that sort of stuff. All power to the people was meant to convince black people that their rewards were due in the present, that it was in their power to create a promised land here and now. The Black Panthers have never intended to turn black people away from religion. We want to encourage them to change their consciousness of themselves and to be less accepting of the white man's version of God. The God of the downtrodden, the weak, and the undeserving. We want them to see themselves as the called, the chosen, and the salt of the earth. Even before we coined the phrase, I had long thought about the idea of God. I could not accept the biblical version. The Bible is too full of contradictions and irrationality. Either you accept it and believe, or you do not. I could not believe. I have arrived at my understanding of what is meant by God through other means, through philosophy, logic, and semantics. My opinion is that the term God belongs to the realm of concepts, that it is dependent upon man for its existence. If God does not exist unless man exists, then man must be here to produce it. It logically follows then that man created God. And if the creator is greater than if the creator is greater than that which is created, then we must hold that man is the highest good. All right? Shout out to Young Chazi up in the chat, and shout out to Zilla up in the chat as well. Continuing here. I can understand why man feels the need to create God, particularly in earlier periods of history when scientific understanding was limited. The phenomenon that man observed around him in the universe sometimes overwhelmed him. He could not explain or account for them. Therefore, he created something in his mind that was greater than these phenomenon, something that was responsible for the mysteries in nature. But I think that when man clings to the idea of a God whom he has created and placed in the heavens, he actually reduces himself and his own potential. The more he attributes to God, the more inferior he becomes, the less responsible for his own destiny. He says to God, I am weak, but thou art mighty, and therefore accepts things as they are, content to leave the running of the world to a supernatural force greater than himself. This attitude embodies a kind of fatalism, which is inimical to growth and change. On the other hand, the greater man becomes, the less his God will be. I mean, that's the way I was thinking when I was 16, 17. You know what I'm saying? I was an atheist who then went on to become a 5%er and then converted to Sunni Islam, was a traditional, very practicing Muslim for many years of my life. And then, I'm sort of at this point where I still believe in God. I still believe in the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but I'm more on a distant journey. I'm on a distant journey where I still keep God in my heart and in my mind. But as far as the practicing of religion, I don't find it that useful for me to be a better person. Though I do believe if you were to follow all the tenets of Islam, you know what I'm saying, you're going to be an all-around better person. No drinking, no swearing, being kind. You know what I'm saying? Being thoughtful, being learned, you know what I'm saying? Being a good Muslim is being a good human being, in my honest opinion. But I don't want Islamic government. I don't want an Islamic society. I don't want people's lives determined by a religious book that some people believe in and other people don't. You know what I'm saying? And I'm more dedicating my life, you know what I'm saying, to towards political action, the struggle, being involved in, making this world a better place for the here and now. And people can worry about their souls in the hereafter on their own personal time. You know what I'm saying? But that's the end of chapter 22. Very interesting, a very philosophical chapter where Huey talks a lot about the origin of the word pig, why they call the police pigs, all power to the people. Now we're going to go to chapter 23. It's titled Crisis, October 28th, 1967. So, when I was convicted of assaulting Odell Lee in 1964, the court sentenced me to 3 years probation under condition that I serve 6 months in the county jail. After release, I reported regularly to my probation officer, all through the months that we founded the Black Panther Party and began our work in the community. The probation officer was better than average, really a pretty nice guy, intelligent and fair, and we got along well. Nonetheless, I was relieved when he told me early in October 1967 that my probation would end on October 27th and parole begin. One of the requirements of parole was that I avoid some parts of Berkeley. In any case, no more reporting. October 27th was going to be a very special day, and my girlfriend, Laverne Williams, and I agreed that we would celebrate the occasion. On the afternoon of October 27th, I was scheduled to speak at a forum on the future of the Black Liberation Movement, sponsored by the Black Student Union of San Francisco State College. Requests for speaking engagements have been coming in frequently since the end of the summer. The Sacramento publicity prompted a number of college groups to ask for an explanation of our approach to the problems of blacks. They were also interested in hearing why we opposed spontaneous rebellions in Black communities and how we viewed the recent riots in Newark and Detroit. Bobby was in jail, and I was filling as many of these requests as possible, even though I am not very good at talking to large groups, nor do I enjoy it. Abstract and theoretical ideas interest me most, but they lack the rhetorical fire to hold audiences. I went to San Francisco State anyway because I was eager to increase our contacts with Black college students. Sharing the platform with me that afternoon was Dr. Harry Edwards, the sociology professor from San Jose State College, who was organizing the Olympic boycott by Black athletes. Shout out to Kareth J up in the comment section. Before I read Kareth's comment, I gotta say, Huey P. Newton was famously a bad public speaker. It's very interesting because he's in the pantheon of our greats. You know, we have Frederick Douglass, you know what I'm saying? We got Martin, Malcolm, Huey P., you know what I'm saying? But most of those people, most of the people that we consider are great, Booker T, W.E.B. Du Bois, they were great public speakers. They were noted for being able to deliver oratory at a, you know, bombastic Cicero level. You know what I'm saying? Huey P. Newton was famously known for giving long-winded, boring speeches that sort of meandered on for hours and hours. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just me saying this. You can find this in Asada's book, Angela Davis's book, and now that we're reading Huey P. Newton's own memoir, Revolutionary Suicide, he says it himself. I'm bad at public speaking. So don't feel bad about your own lack of oratory skill. Going to Kareth J., he said, could you say that tangible legislative and executive responses of U.S. government show it consider the Black Panthers a greater threat than the communist or socialist parties of Harry Haywood's era? I don't believe after reading, number one, I still have to do more research about how the U.S. government infiltrated and destabilized the communists. After reading Harry Haywood's book and reading his recount of the Communist Party and how they went through the Browder years when Browder became the chairman of the Communist Party or whatever, the leader, I highly believe, and there's no evidence to back this up, that Browder was planted there by the FBI, CIA, or some other government agency, three-letter agency. You know what I'm saying? I believe that the communists had momentum, but they were always infiltrated. I believe the Communist Party of the United States was highly infiltrated. You know what I'm saying? And I believe when the Black Panthers popped up, the U.S. government probably used some of the same techniques that they used on the Communist Party on the Black Panthers, but just dialed it up. You know what I'm saying? Because as far as I remember right now, and with my limited knowledge about the communists and the socialists of the United States in the early and mid 20th century, there wasn't like a Fred Hampton situation. Like the police didn't just break in and just shoot a young communist leader in the chest while he was sleeping. You know what I'm saying? And we do know that the Black Panthers were infiltrated by the alphabet boys, but I wouldn't say, one was greater or better. You know what I'm saying? As we know about the communists in the United States, there are laws still on the books today, like I believe in Louisiana, but definitely in Texas, where you cannot be even on the ballot if you are a communist. You cannot be a member of a certain type of union, like the AFL-CIO, if you are a known communist. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of discriminatory legislature against the communists. And as we read yesterday about the Black Panthers, they passed one legislation saying that you can't ride around with loaded ammunition in the car, against the Black Panthers, right? When the Panthers famously stormed into Sacramento, they passed that law. I forgot the name, but it was named after one of their state senators who was basically trying to get at the Black Panthers. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't want to compare, but I would say that there's probably a lot of similarities. But I'd be interested to know, what do you think? What do you think, Kareth J? Do you think the U.S. government put more effort into crushing the communists or the Black Panthers? I don't know. I'm going to continue here. So that session was particularly challenging because it offered the opportunity for a lively discussion with people who disagreed with my ideas. This was in 1967, just after one of the longest, hottest summers in American history. Student consciousness had never been higher. I talked about the necessity for Black people to gain control of the institutions in their own communities, eventually transforming them into cooperatives, and of one day working with other ethnic groups to change the system. When I had finished speaking, an informal dialogue began. Almost all of the students' questions and criticisms were directed at the Black Panthers' willingness to work in coalition with white groups. We maintained this was possible as long as we controlled the programs, but the students were opposed to working with white groups, or for that matter, almost anyone but Blacks. While this viewpoint was understandable to me, it failed to take into consideration the limitations of our power. We needed allies, and we believed that alliances with young whites, students, and workers were worth the risk. So, As you know, I started reading this book around the time the Black Panthers came back up in the zeitgeist because there's this new guy, Paul Birdsong, running around claiming he represents the Panthers, right? He's the new Black Panther Party. He recently changed his party name to the Black Lion Party, and many people were mad that Paul Birdsong went out with his Panthers to protest against ICE. And he said if a police officer come up to him, he's going to put a hole in him the size of a window. But all the black people on the internet were mad at him because he was protesting against ICE. You know, the people who said, I will vote for Donald Trump are now getting what they voted for. And here Huey P. Newton is dealing with the same thing. Basically, black people were saying, we don't want to work with anybody else. We only want to work with black people. We don't care about working with whites, whether they be liberal or leftist. We only want to work with our people. And Huey P. Newton is throwing his hands up in the air saying, this isn't what I believe. This isn't what the party is about. But if this is what the people are asking for, then we have to understand them. We have to meet the people where they are. Continuing here. I pointed out that many young whites had suddenly discovered hypocrisy. Their fathers and forefathers had written and talked brotherhood and democracy while practicing greed, imperialism, and racism. While speaking of the rights of mankind and equality for all, a free enterprise, the profit system, individualism, and healthy competition, they had plundered the wealth of the world and enslaved blacks in the United States. White youths now saw through this hypocrisy and were trying to bring about changes through traditional electoral politics. But reality is impervious to idealism. These youngsters were discovering what blacks knew in their bones, that the military-industrial complex was practically invincible and had in fact created a police state, which rendered idealism powerless to change anything. This led to disillusionment with their parents in the American power structure. At that point of disillusionment, they began to identify with the oppressed people of the world, as it is for a lot of white leftists. You know what I'm saying? Like, honestly, I feel bad. I feel bad for a lot of white folks for this reason. And I'm going to say this after I come back and open the window. All right. Ooh. All right. Sorry, I had to open the window. It's getting hot in here. I'm going so hard. All right. I'm saying this. I was thinking about this literally before I started this live stream. It's got to be bad to be a young millennial or Gen Z white person, right? Because if you're a young millennial Gen Z white person who's not MAGA, who has not gone off the deep end, who's not reactionary, it probably sucks going home for Thanksgiving dinner. Because it's a high probability that dad, granddad, all your uncles, your aunties, your mama is MAGA. So if you're a young white millennial who still has sense, who still has sanity, who sees that the president is a pedophile, corrupt, sick bastard, right? And hasn't bought into all the Newsmax and Fox News propaganda and the Facebook AI racist bullshit that gets fed to them. If you're a young white millennial, you go home and it's terrorism. If you're a young black man, woman who is a millennial or Gen Z and you go home for Thanksgiving, it's just like it's 1999. Everybody's chilling. You ain't got to argue with your uncle that maybe the Somalis aren't, eating cats and dogs or whatever bullshit they now believe in the MAGA world. You know what I'm saying? It sucks being white, millennial, Gen Z, and liberal because your parents are probably fucking retarded. Your parents are probably fucking retarded. Anyway, I'm going to read this comment here. Kareth J says, at least to me it's apparent that cheap drugs were a response to credible social organizing of the Black Panther Party. I don't know. We all know that the government dropped them bales of crack. Who taught you how to cook crack? The CIA. You know what I'm saying? I don't know about that. Shout out to AOL America Online. AOL America Online. Shout out to AOL America Online up in the comment section. We're going to continue here reading Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. When the Black Panthers saw this trend developing of young whites bucking the system, we understood that their dissatisfaction could help our cause. In a few years' time, almost half of the American population would be composed of young people. If we developed strong and meaningful alliances with white youth, they would support our goals and work against the establishment. Everywhere I went in 1967, I was vehemently attacked by black students for this position. Few could present opposing objective evidence to support their criticisms. The reaction was emotional. All white people were devils. They wanted nothing to do with them. I agreed that some white people could act like devils, but we could not blind ourselves to a common humanity. More important was how to control the situation to our advantage. These questions would not be answered overnight or in a decade, and time again, the students and I went for hours getting nowhere. We talked right past each other. The racism that dominated their lives had come between us, and rational analysis was the victim. When I left San Francisco that afternoon, I reflected that many of the students who were supposedly learning how to analyze and understand phenomena were in fact caught up in the same predicament as the prisoners in Plato's cave allegory. Even though they were in college, they were still prisoners in the cave of exploitation and racism that black people have been subjected to for centuries. Far from preparing them to deal with reality, college kept their intellects in chains. That afternoon, I felt even more strongly that the party would have to develop a program to implement point 5 of our program, a true education for our people. Okay? So, shout out to AOL, America Online. What Huey P just said here is very pertinent and very important, because I feel like if you're a black person who has thought deep and long about the state of our people, whether it be in a specific country in the Americas, in the diaspora, in part of Europe, wherever you are in the world, or on the continent, you've gone through that phase where you just said, damn, whites are just basically the devil. You know what I'm saying? The white man is the devil. But then when you leave the cave, like Huey P. Newton analogizes here, and you see that the shadows on the wall is just a byproduct of the sun, then you realize, oh shit, it's not just that whites are inherently racist or evil. White people are not inherently racist or evil. In fact, white people don't exist. It's a creation of a system meant to exploit and divide working people. It's meant to divide people based on skin color. Some random shit that some people came up with a few hundred years ago when they were trying to develop capitalism. You get what I'm saying? And that's the issue here. And so Huey P. Newton is saying here, like, listen, he went to go talk to the grassroots, the young black college students who are revolutionary, fired up, and all they have to say is that the white man's the devil, the white man's the devil, and Huey P. Newton is like arguing with them like, no, not all white people are just evil. That's stupid. That's reactionary. You know what I'm saying? So that's the problem here. I'm going to go to the comments. AOL, So AOL America Online says he's a graduate student, or he's in a graduate program. He could be a teacher in the program, who knows? And he's saying he sees a lot of the same things. You know what I'm saying? And he says it's a lot of groupthink. And shout out to Zilla up in the chat as well. Let's keep the conversation going. I like the comments. If it's an intellectual comment, I will be reading it. I will be reading it if I can tell that you're using some brain cells up here. Let's continue here. So, when I returned home around 6:30, I had a happy, righteous dinner of mustard greens and cornbread with my family. We discussed the college students and their attitudes and how difficult it had been to get through to them. That was our last meal together as a family for 33 months. But I had no premonition of this when I left the house and set out on foot for Laverne's. The friends with me at San Francisco State had taken the car after driving me home. On the way, I planned our evening together and thought about some of the things I might do now that I no longer had to report to my probation officer. At Laverne's house, I found to my disappointment that she was ill and did not feel like going out. Although I wanted to stay with her, she insisted that I take her car and celebrate. She knew how much it meant to me that probation was over. By this time, it was getting late, close to 10, so I decided to visit a few of my favorite places. Nothing about my movements that evening was out of the ordinary. I went first to the Bosun's Locker, the bar where I had started recruiting. Most of the people there were close or casual friends, and I talked, discussing my new freedom and celebrating with a liberation drink, Cuba Libre, a rum and coke. From there, I went to a nearby church where a social was in full swing. Every Wednesday night, this church held an Afro history class, and on Friday nights, a well-attended social with dancing and punch. I had one more place to go, a party being given by friends on San Pablo Street in Oakland. About 2 a.m., when the social was ending, I set out for the party with Gene McKinney, a friend I had known since grammar school. By now, it was October 28th. I was officially a free man and feeling great. Even though the food was gone by the time we got to San Pablo Street, I did not mind. It was good to mingle with the people and talk about the Black Panthers and answer their questions. We stayed until the very end, 4 a.m. Then Gene McKinney and I headed for 7th Street, the center of the action for West Oakland. There are a number of bars and soul food restaurants on the street, a few nightclubs, and at almost any hour you can find something going on. Some of the restaurants serve up barbecue that is really saying something. Gene and I were hungry, and 7th Street is the place to get righteous soul food. As I turned into 7th Street looking for a parking place, I saw the red lights of a police car in my rearview mirror. I had not realized that I was being tailed or trailed by a policeman, and my initial reaction was, here we go again, more harassment. But having been stopped so many times before, I was ready. The police had a list of the licenses on cars Black Panthers frequently used, so we always expected this. I kept my law book between the bucket seat, and I knew that once I began to read the law to the law enforcer, he would have to let me go. I wondered what his excuse would be this time. I had obeyed all the traffic regulations. I pulled the car over to the curb, and the police officer stopped behind me, remaining in his car for a minute or so. Then he got out and came up to my window. When he got a good look at me, he stuck his head in the window within 6 inches of my face, said very sarcastically, well, 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 what do we have here? The great Huey P. Newton, said the crack-ass cracker. I'm sorry, that was me coming out. I'm sorry. So the police said, well, 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 this is the great Huey P. Newton. I made no reply, but merely looked him in the eye. He acted like a fisherman who had just landed a prize catch he had never dreamed of landing. Then he asked for my driver's license, which I gave to him. Who does the car belong to? He asked. I told him it belongs to Miss Laverne Williams and showed him the registration. After comparing it with the license, he gave me the license back and went to his car with the registration. While I sat in the car waiting for him to finish, another police officer pulled up behind the first one. This was not unusual, and I attached little significance to it. The second officer walked up to the first officer's car, and they talked for a moment. Then the second officer came to my window and said, Mr. Williams, do you have any further identification? I said, what do you mean, Mr. Williams? My name is Huey P. Newton, and I have already shown my driver's license to the first officer. He just looked at me, nodding his head, and said, yes, I know who you are. I knew they both recognized me because my picture and name were known to every officer in Oakland, as were Bobby's and most of the other Black Panthers. The first officer then came back to my car, opened the door, and ordered me out, while the second officer walked around to the passenger side and told Gene McKinney to get out. He then walked Gene to the street side of the car. Meanwhile, I picked up my law book from between the seats and started to get out. I thought it was my criminal evidence book, which covers laws dealing with reasonable cause for arrest and the search and seizure laws. If necessary, I intended to read the law to the policeman, as I had done so many times in the past. However, I had mistakenly picked up my criminal law book, which looks exactly like the other one. All right? Shout out to Weglick up in the chat. Continuing here, Huey P. Newton says in Revolutionary Suicide, chapter 23, I got out of the car with the book in my right hand and asked the officer if I was under arrest. He said, no, you're not under arrest. Just lean on the car. I leaned on top of the car, a Volkswagen, with both hands on the law book while the officer searched me. He did it in a manner intended to be degrading, pulling out my shirt tail, running his hand over my body, and then he searched my legs, bringing his hands up into my genital area. He was both disgusting and thorough. All this time, the four of us were in the street. The second officer was Gene McKinney. I could not see what they were doing. The officer then told me to go back to his car because he wanted to talk to me. Taking my left arm in his right hand, he began walking, or rather pushing me toward his car. But when we reached it, he kept going until we had reached the back door of the second police car, where he brought me to an abrupt halt. At this, I opened my law book and said, "You have no reasonable cause to arrest me." The officer was to my left, just slightly behind me. As I was opening the book, he snarled, "You can take that book and shove it up your ass," with a hard R. Repeat, the officer said to Huey P. Newton, when Huey P. Newton, all he did was want to read the law book to the law enforcer, to the police officer, who are only meant to protect and serve, who are only meant to be in the community to try to, help people, right? That's what the police are there for, right? The police officer said to Huey P. Newton, "You can take that law book and shove it up your ass," with the hard R. With that, he stepped slightly in front of me and brought his left hand up into my face, hooking me with a smear that was not a direct blow, but more like a solid, straight arm. This momentarily dazed me, and I stumbled back 4 or 5 feet and went down on one knee, still holding on to my book. As I started to rise, I saw the officer draw his service revolver, pointed at me, and fire. Damn. So the officer hits him with a straight arm like this. The officer puts his straight arm into Huey's face after calling him the hard R, and then pulls his gun out on Huey and fires in his face like that. Damn. God damn. Shout out to OG Kicks up in the chat. Shout out to OG Kicks up in the chat. My stomach seemed to explode, as if someone had poured a pot of boiling soup all over me, and the world went hazy. There were some shots, a rapid volley, but I have no idea where they came from. They seemed to be all around me. I vaguely remember being on my hands and knees on the ground, disoriented, with everything spinning. I also had the sensation of being moved or propelled. After that, I remember nothing. Shout out to Big Wet Burrito. That's a crazy name. Big Wet Burrito, you have the craziest name in the chat. That's crazy. Anyway, for the people out there who love police, this is a first-hand account of a police officer trying to murder a man, trying to murder an unarmed man who only had a book in his hand. The police officer shot Huey P. Newton in point-blank range when all Huey P. had was a book in his hand. And we know the police officer knew he had a book in his hand because he said, "Take that law book and shove it up your ass." What a sick fuck. Fuck all police. All police are bastards. All police are evil. All police are evil. I repeat. Anyway, that's the end of chapter 23 of Revolutionary Suicide, where Huey recounts his story of getting shot by the police. We're going to go here to chapter 24, and it starts like this. Black brother, think you life so sweet that you will live at any price? Does mere existence balance with the weight of your great sacrifice? Or can it be you fear the grave, enough to live and die a slave? Oh, brother, be it better said, when you are gone and tears are shed, that your death was the stepping stone, your children's children crossed upon. Men have died that men might live. Look every foeman in the eye, if necessary, your life give. For something, ere in vain you die. Ray Garfield Dandridge, Time to Die. Beautiful poem. Beautiful poem. I'm not the biggest fan of poetry, but when I read a beautiful poem, you gotta salute that. That was dope. Anyway, chapter 24, Aftermath. Long after I was shot, I hovered between consciousness and unconsciousness. I remember some things and have no memory of others. It was a terrifying time. The blood was pounding in my head. Waves of pain engulfed me, and everything around me receded into a vast blur. I lost all sense of minutes and hours. The next thing I recall is arriving at the entrance of Kaiser Hospital, which is about 5 miles from the scene of the shooting. I have no idea how I got there. I remember a platform at the entrance about the height of my waist. It seemed to have no steps leading up to it, and I wondered how I would get up on it. Although I was in excruciating pain, I managed to roll onto the platform. Then I rose and somehow staggered into the hospital, where I asked for a doctor. I do not remember the person I spoke to, but whoever it was would not call a doctor and kept mentioning the police. The time seemed endless, and I grew weaker and weaker. Someone finally helped me into a room and put me on a gurney, and a doctor came at last. As he began to examine the wound in my stomach, the police burst in. Although I was in terrific pain and completely helpless, they grabbed my hands and stretched them above my head, handcuffing them to the gurney on both sides. This pulled and stretched my stomach, causing real agony. Then they began to beat on my handcuffs, already too tight and cutting into my flesh, for more than a year after I had a pinched nerve, where they pounded the steel into my wrists. Before long, the pain in my arms was more intense than the pain in my stomach. It was more than I could stand, and I screamed, begging the doctor who was watching this to make the police loosen the handcuffs. He told me to shut up. Damn. There was also a black nurse in the room, and she became very upset, but there was nothing she could do. The police were all around me, hitting me in my face and head, and calling me names. They said I had killed one policeman, John Frey, had wounded another, Herbert Haynes, and that my life was no longer worth anything. You're going to die for this, they promised. If you don't die in the gas chamber, then when you're sent to prison, we'll have you killed there. And if you're acquitted, we'll kill you in the streets. Some of the police spat on me, and I spat back, getting rid of some of the mucus and blood in my throat. Gangster, spitting on police. We approve. That's approved. Spit on police. Spit on your local police officer. All right, continuing here. Getting rid of some of the mucus and blood in my throat, I spat at the police. Each time they came at me, I spat blood in their faces and over their uniforms. Finally, the doctor put a towel over my mouth, and the police continued their attacks. I was still screaming in pain when I passed out completely. I regained consciousness in Highland Alameda County Hospital in East Oakland, having been moved there because I was not a member of the Kaiser Health Plan. My wound had been treated, and I was in bed with a penile catheter and tubes running into my nose and abdominal area. Machines arranged around the bed removed the excess fluids and mucus from the tubes. The police had awakened me. Whenever I fell asleep, they would wake me up again. I was so heavily drugged for the first few days, it is difficult to remember everything that went on. When I first regained consciousness, I seemed to remember thinking about my situation and wondering if it was hopeless. My fear was not death itself, but a death without meaning. I wanted my death to be something that people could relate to, a basis for further mobilization of the community. I remember a radio playing in the room and the announcer saying something about a song dedicated to the Minister of Defense. However, I was not sure I had really heard it. Perhaps it was my imagination. At that point, a nurse came into the room and, seeing I was awake, asked if I had heard the song dedicated to me. Then I knew that my situation was not hopeless and that the people were relating to the incident, whatever it was. This gave me much comfort at the time, even though I was in the hands of my oppressors. I knew that the establishment would do everything in its power to destroy me, but this small sign of community response helped me to begin to deal with the police in my room. During this time this was happening, I kept waking up and drifting back to sleep. I soon discovered that my feet were shackled, the chains connecting one ankle to the other, with both fastened to the bed. It was a strange feeling to wake up and find your feet in chains. At first, I wondered if I was having a nightmare, but then I remembered the officer drawing his service revolver and the scene at the Kaiser Hospital. And I decided it was no dream. I really was shackled, and police were there guarding me. They meant to kill me, as they had long wanted to do, and as the officer who shot me had attempted to do. Under the circumstances, my survival was a miracle. Shortly after the incident, I received a letter from a physician, Dr. Aguilar, which was printed in the Black Panther newspaper, and it read something like this. I can remember nothing in my medical training which suggested that in the care of an acute abdominal injury, severe pain and hemorrhage are best treated by manacling the patient to the examining table in such a way that the back is arched and belly tensed. Yet this is precisely the picture of current emergency room procedure which appeared on the front page of a local newspaper last weekend. Looming large in the foreground of the same picture, so large as to suggest a caricature, was a police officer. Could it have been he who distracted the doctor in charge of the case to position the patient in this curious way? Unusual as it was, this picture probably did not disrupt very much the pleasant weekend enjoyed by my neighbors, nor disturb more than momentarily the consciences of my medical colleagues. To me, upon whose mind's eye it is permanently engraved, this photograph is a portentous document of modern history. It represents an end and a beginning. Further, for me, there has been enough of listening, of reading, of pondering. The time has now come to speak, to act, to fight back. I have read essays written by the patient, Huey P. Newton. I have heard him patiently and painstakingly articulating his ideas and his hopes to a parade of questioners. Hour after hour, he continues to address the convinced and the unconvinced alike, without malice. I have listened to him paraphrasing the concepts set forth in Dr. Fannin's books in a dozen brilliantly succinct sentences. I have listened to him and marveled that a young man of 25 years old, oh my God, I'm 35 years old. I'm 35 years old and Huey P. has done more with his life than I ever will at only 25 years old, man. Come on now. That's crazy. I have listened to him and marveled that a young man of 25 years can interpret in such scholarly fashion the historic, socioeconomic, and political implications of the trend of modern society, while I, on the other hand, after 45 years, 17 of them spent in study at college and in postdoctoral education, discover I learned little of human value and must begin again. Okay, so it wasn't just me. Even the guy who's a doctor here says, yeah, Huey P. Newton he's a better man than all of us. He's a better man than all of us. He's more advanced. He knows more about humanity than me, a man who spent 13 years studying to become a doctor. Continuing. The beginning, again for me, dates from the last time I saw the patient, several weeks ago in a discussion with a group of people, many of whom came by, listened a while, and left. One such young man called later in the evening to say that he was in jail. He had been detained by the police for what they suspected might be a minor infraction of the motor vehicle code, mistakenly as it turned out, for they quickly determined that no law had been broken. Not content, the police undertook lengthy investigation, which ultimately revealed that the young man had not satisfactorily replied to a charge of driving with an invalid license 1 year ago. For this reason, he was now jailed with a bail set at $550. It took 3 hours to fill out the requisition form, pay the requisite fees, and see the requisite people in order to extricate this black boy from his cell. All right. Shout out to Pro Baller 123 up in the chat. Shout out to Pro Baller showing love. I appreciate that. It's just a jacket, my friend. Just a corduroy jacket. Anyway, so 2 days later, I was driving with a friend on the highway when she was apprehended because of 4 concurrent infractions of the motor vehicle code, including driving without a valid permit for the trailer we were pulling. Nothing happened in spite of the fact that we were detained momentarily some miles farther on for still another infraction, this time a moving violation. We still arrived home in time for dinner. 2 white ladies in their comfortable white neighborhood. My friend told me later her total bail for all of this lawlessness came to $15. So please do not waste my time, my white brothers and sisters, in telling me that justice is dispensed equally under the law to all Americans. I will not believe you. Okay, I didn't know this was a white woman. I did not know that this was a white woman writing a letter. But that's crazy. This white woman is here to say, me and my girlfriends break the law all the time. We be driving drunk, Chardonnay breath just out the window. Miley Cyrus cranked up to the max. Screaming, fuck the law. White women breaking the law. And then she's writing a letter saying, y'all don't tell me that Huey P. Newton is in jail for a good reason when us white folks get to break the law all the time. Meanwhile, this young black man is shot with a hole in his stomach from the police, handcuffed to the bed. That's crazy. That's funny. That's pretty funny. Anyway, NOJJWN1YT is up in the comments. I don't know. Y'all need better handles on YouTube, I swear. Y'all just need good names. Anyway, do you support Malcolm X? Well, Malcolm X is dead. There's not much to support. What could I'm sorry. Well, that's an insane comment. I have no idea how to respond to that comment. Do you support Malcolm X? Support him in what? Support him in being digested? Support him in his decomposition? What am I supposed to say? Do you support Malcolm X? I don't know. Do you support George Washington? No, what is that's an insane comment. Anyway, I'm gonna continue reading here. So, I apologize, Mr. Newton, for any aggravation of suffering inflicted upon you during the course of treatment of your injuries. I apologize for the subhuman conditions and horrors of the ghetto in which an immoral political and social system makes it inevitable that men like you are gunned down in the streets of your own town. Signed, Mary Jane Aguilar, medical doctor. Now that's a white woman. Now that's a white woman who's an ally. That's how you do allyship. Say you and your girlfriends be breaking the law all the time. That's funny as hell. I'm sorry. So I'm going to continue here. So Huey P. Newton says in Revolutionary Suicide, all the time I was in the hospital. The police did their best to exhaust me. Every time I dropped off, they kicked the bed or shook me. One of them held a sawed-off shotgun up to my face, warning me that it was going to go off accidentally. Another showed me a razor blade and threatened to cut the tubes and let me suffocate. One of them predicted I would commit suicide by pulling the tubes out of my nose. Sometimes they even moved the tubes. They told me I was going to burn. They repeated their threat that I would be gassed in the little green chamber in San Quentin. If I escaped, they said, they would have me killed. They even took bets among themselves on whether I would get the gas chamber or life in prison. They made remarks like, the hard R, the N-word, is going to die. He's done for now. He's going to die in the gas chamber, said the police. Said the police. All right? Kareth J is in the comments. He said, seriously, though, as a black middle-class old head, the collared shirt and tie and a level of panache to your discourse adds a level of panache to your discourse. I appreciate that, sir. You know, I know I'm very young in face and feature, but I'm 35 years old, so I'm trying to dress my age, you know what I'm saying? So just wearing the button down every now and then, or at least making myself presentable. And I know a lot of the times for black men, it's all about respectability politics online. You know what I'm saying? It's all about respectability politics online. Because when I wear my hoodies, when I wear t-shirts, when I wear other shit, people don't actually pay attention to what I'm saying. And as you even see in this chat right here, I'm getting called the N-word. I'm being called all types of racial slurs, even though I'm presenting myself in a respectable way, in a very traditional way. And this goes to show, and I want my life to be a demonstration to people, that no matter how many ties you put on, how many suits you wear, to white supremacists, and to the vast majority, I would also argue, of white people, people who identify as white or make that a core part of their identity, you are not human. There is no level of cologne you can put on, suits you can wear, hard bottom wingtips you can put on your feet to make yourself human to people that want to call a man that looks like this the N-word. You get what I'm saying? There's nothing we can do. So that's a little bit of the Afro-pessimist in me coming out, but I also just like to dress fly. I like to dress fly, and, you know, I'm too old to be wearing, like, Jordans all the time and shit, okay? Kareth J said, did you lose weight too? Damn, y'all calling me fat. Y'all calling me fat online. Ain't that something? No, I probably did not lose weight, though I did buy a treadmill for the house. I bought a treadmill for the house, and I've been walking during my English classes. NOJW is, okay, okay. Kareth J, yes, sad but true about respectability politics. Shout out to NOJW up in the comments section. Let's continue reading Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. Continuing here. So Huey says, I never replied to the physical threats against my life from the police, but I did complain to the nurses about the abuse. The supervisor of nurses paid a visit, smiled at the police apologetically, and asked them if they were bothering me. Oh, no, of course not, they said, smiling back. When she left, the harassment started again. They even prevented a black nurse from treating me. White nurses came and went at will. But when a black nurse tried to take my blood pressure, the police grabbed her and she ran terrified from the room. Then the supervisor came back. "Now you know she works here," she said. "You shouldn't bother her like that." This cruel game went on until my family, who could scarcely afford it, hired private nurses to be with me all the time. Things improved then because the nurses watched the police and made them leave me alone. All right? From the moment my family heard about the incident, they did everything to help me. They had rushed to Kaiser Hospital and stayed close by me while I underwent surgery. Then at Highland Hospital, they hired private nurses to protect me from police abuse. My brother Melvin and my sister Leola, with Eldridge Cleaver and other Black Panthers, began the arrangements for my legal defense. They knew it was going to be difficult since the police were determined to have me convicted and ruin the party. To the police, it was a golden opportunity. Bobby was in jail, and they had what looked to be an open and shut case against me. The efforts of my family to get me the best legal help soon brought encouraging results. One afternoon, after I had been in Highland Hospital a few days, I heard a commotion outside my door. The police were trying to keep out someone, a woman, who was determined to come in, and she was raising all kinds of hell. It was Beverly Axelrod, the lawyer who had done so much to get Eldridge Cleaver out of prison, and with her was a black attorney. Because I was still so weak, Beverly did not stay long that day, just long enough to assure me that every effort was being made to find the best lawyer to fight my case. Lady, aren't you a lawyer? Why aren't you out here fighting for my case? How are you going to come in and be one of the top lawyers in the country and say, "Oh, Huey, we're out here finding the best lawyer for you"? Bitch, you better help me. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, Beverly felt it was too big and difficult a case for her. Yeah, right. But I sensed in her someone who would stand by me, no matter what the cost. Beverly has never betrayed that confidence. Most of the time, I have never thought of her as a white person. Politically, she is left-wing, but more important, she is a generous and open human being, capable of growth and change. I have known her now for many years, and often in the past, I had discovered, while talking to her, that she had certain unconscious racist ways of looking at things. Whenever this was pointed out to her, she would examine her attitude and deal with them in ways that changed her life. Now, that's a good ally. That's a good ally. That's how I wish all white people were. You know what I mean? Instead of getting defensive when you call out the anti-blackness that's regular in just white existence, instead of getting defensive or denying, they just examine. They do some self-examination. They actually reach into the parts of Western civilization that are good. Because there's parts of Western civilization that are good. And what is one of the premium quotes, one of the best quotes from Plato? "A life unexamined is not worth living." And if that's not Plato, that's Socrates. But it's one of those old dead white guys that they hold up as the pillars of Western civilization, which is not all bad. But if you do not live and examine life, your life is not worth living. And that's why white supremacists should kill themselves. They should all commit suicide. Revolutionary suicide. I'm sorry. I crack myself up sometimes. Anyway. So Beverly Axelrod, when she was called out for racism, she examined her attitudes and dealt with them in ways that changed her life. It was this ability to change that convinced me she was genuine and could be trusted. So when she spoke of the lawyer, Charles Gary, during that first visit, I knew I could have confidence in her opinion of him. Beverly had met Gary in the early 1950s when she was a parole officer. She had become a protege of his. He had given her cases and helped her to establish a law practice. She told me that Charles Gary had a long history of defending the politically, racially, and socially depressed. His concern for social justice came from his father, who had fled Armenia after the 1896 massacre and settled in Bridgeport, Massachusetts. There, he had been involved in the early labor movement and led a strike against a factory paying low wages to workers. The family moved to San Francisco in 1915, and Charles put himself through law school, specializing in labor law after graduation. In the early days of his practice, when labor unions did not have the respectability they later enjoyed, he represented 16 unions. Over the years, he became more and more involved in political cases, defending dissenters and activists in unpopular but important causes. He developed a strong sense of commitment to the underprivileged and those whose rights were not fully protected. Because the political dissenter, the accused criminal, and the early trade union organizer were looked upon as social outcasts, Gary maintained that they were most in need of justice and should have the best legal talent. Gary had a reputation as a brilliant trial lawyer with a remarkable gift for cross-examining witnesses and an acute understanding of the jury's importance in political cases. He believed that in political trials, a defense lawyer must try to select a jury that is not so much concerned with law and order as with basic principle, the moral principle of law. I wish more people were like Mr. Gary here, who lived a wild story. He said he was from Armenia. His family had fled Armenia. His father had fled Armenia. Listen, there are a few black people in the world. There are a few white people. Okay, there are a few white people in the world. There are a few white people in the world who relate to black people. And I'm going to say, and there's a lot of problematic white people. There are a lot of problematic white people. But the best of the whites usually come from these communities. The best of the whites usually come from these communities. The Armenians, the Irish, the Jews. Here's a curveball. I'm going to throw this out there. And I know y'all going to kill me. The best of the whites, Italy. I know. Moolies, all sorts of, I know. But I feel like some of the best whites who have been the best allies have also come from Italy. And I'm standing on business on that. You know what I'm saying? In Italy, they got a major trade union movement. You know, it's where the Communist Party has still been alive and popping. You know, you got Italians that go out into the Mediterranean Sea to save a lot of black Africans. I know there's a lot of problematic Italians. There's so many of them. But I'm saying the best of them. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. All right. The Armenians, the Jews, the Irish, the Italians. A top five. I can't even think of the fifth. I'm going to throw, okay, I was going to throw the French in there, but the French have a long history of anti-black racism and slavery. So no, I'm not going to throw the French in there. Okay, that's it. The door is closed right now. We're just going to have the top four whites, the best whites, Armenians, Irish, Jews, Italians. And y'all find the fifth draft pick. All right, give a shout out. We're going to give a shout out to Red up in the chat. We're going to give a shout out to Paul, Kareth J. We're going to give a shout out to everybody up in the chat. Thanks for showing love as we continue to read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. Let me also check on the other live stream chat because we got 2 live streams going at the same time. Shout out to AOL. All right. Polish. Should the Poles be included? I don't know. The Poles dress up in blackface. I don't know if the Poles can be included. I might throw the Norwegians in there, but I don't know because they also had a right-wing white supremacist terrorist attack in Norway a few years ago. So I don't know if I can include the Norwegians in there. I don't know. All right, but those are my top 4 whites. Okay. All right. AOL America Online says, truth be told, I'm an Italian and Polish Jew myself. Eastern Europeans pretty brutally persecuted. A fair amount of those in America relate, I think. I get that. Okay. I'm not going to throw the Polish part of you into the good. I'm not going to throw the Polish part of you into the, oh, you know who? Okay. This is the thing. They might not be considered white. But a lot of them got green eyes. A lot of them got blonde hair. A lot of them got green eyes and a lot of them got blonde hair. So I'm going to throw, here's my 5th round draft pick. 5th round draft pick into the best whites. The Kurds. Yes, I know. But are they white though? Are the Kurds white? I'm throwing the Kurds in there. But the top 5 whites of all time, the Armenians, because they brought a system of a down in the Kardashians. Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame. The Jews, come on. Besides the genocide in Gaza and besides creating a nation state, they've been pretty dope. They've been pretty dope. Yes, there's a lot of problematic Jews as well. Schwarzy, they got racial slurs for black people. Yeah, they sterilized the Ethiopians, cut off, women's ability to reproduce because they were black and from Ethiopia. Yes, there's a lot of problematic Jews, but still, the Jews have earned their rank. You know what I'm saying? Who else? We have the Irish. Okay, the Irish are problematic in a lot of ways, but Irish soldiers went into the Congo to help fight against the imperialist forces, and they thought that they were going to be allied. That's how you know that they at least have some consciousness. They have some consciousness about imperialism and their face in it. You know what I'm saying? The Irish soldiers went into the Congo to fight against imperialism. This is a true fact. Look it up. Look it up. So we're throwing the Irish in there. We're throwing the Irish in there. Who else? Who else? We have the Italians. We have the Italians. Strong labor movement, helping the blacks in the Mediterranean. And we're also throwing in the Kurds. We're throwing in the Kurds. The Kurds have dealt with a lot of oppression, and they relate. I've never met a Kurdish person generally I did not like and who didn't understand where I was coming from when I said, these white people crazy. And they'd be like, yep, they crazy. You know what I'm saying? So the Kurds are in there. Kurds are in top 5 whites of all time. But who do you think are in the top 5 whites? I'm sorry I went off. Okay, I'm sorry. Continuing here. All right. So, yeah, anyway. During World War II, Gary had insisted on serving as a combat infantryman, although he was an obvious candidate for a commission in the Judge Advocates Corps. He made this choice because of his strong opposition to fascism. He wanted to be totally involved in helping defeat it. Charles Gary was obviously an extraordinary man. Okay, this guy could have had a desk job, but he said, nope, I want to go outside and kill fascists. That's hard. Charles Gary, top 5 white. Top 5 white. He's top 5 white. Charles Gary said, do I want to sit behind a desk or kill fascists in World War II with my bare hands? Yeah, I want to go outside and kill Nazis and fascists. I mean, you can't disagree with that. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. The same day that Beverly came to see me, John George, a black attorney who had previously handled a number of cases for me, arrived at the hospital. The police barred him from my room. It was typical of their racism. A white lawyer could demand to see me and get in, but a black lawyer was chased away. Regardless of position or education, color was all that mattered. Soon after, however, John did manage to get in and brought Beverly with him. He felt, as she did, that an explosive case like mine required someone with more experience than he had, someone with a large office staff and the necessary investigative and research facilities. In between these visits, the police talked loudly about Beverly and John. They hated Beverly Axelrod passionately. They hated Beverly Axelrod passionately because she had gotten Eldridge out of the penitentiary. The fact that she was white only made her more culpable, I think. They viciously ridiculed her and mocked John George, making fun of his physical characteristics. All through this, I lay shackled to the bed, half drugged and in pain, while they swaggered about with their guns, waiting for visitors to leave the room, then threatening to kill me. Other people visited. I remember nothing distinctly about the first week or so, but I know that my family came regularly, and I remember seeing my brothers and sisters in the room from time to time. My mother was terribly upset by the whole experience and could not bring herself to come to the hospital. It was almost impossible for the people who were not relatives or lawyers to get in to see me. Yet waking up one day, I became aware of a complete stranger in my room, a black man, neither a lawyer nor a relative. Neither a lawyer nor a relative. He was probably a police agent trying to lure me into a damaging statement. But he went about his task in such a clumsy, transparent way that he got nowhere. I knew he could not have entered the room without an assignment to investigate the case for the police, so I let him do the talking. Finally, Charles Gary came to visit me. Before Beverly mentioned his name, I had never heard of him, but my respect and trust for her transferred to him. The party and my family had decided to put the whole matter into his hands from a legal point of view. I was only half conscious, and Gary showed deep concern for my pain. That first day, we did not discuss strategy. Gary said simply that he admired my stand and would be proud to represent me. I returned the compliment. Go into the comments. Big Remy, shout out to Big Remy up in the chat. Are you a foundational Black American? Unfortunately, I am, sir. Fortunately, I have an American passport. What I wish I could have done to choose better parents. What I wish I could have done to choose better parents. But yes, I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, with long roots that go back all the way to the 18th century. It's what my father's side of the family, we could trace it back to the 18th century in Virginia. You know what I'm saying? I have a video on my channel. I suggest Big Remy, you check out a video on my channel titled Foundational Black American, and then come back to this video because you can see my whole family history in that video, okay? All right, continuing here. So, as I lay recovering from my wounds, I tried to assess my position, to think of the immediate emergency and also its larger meaning and significance. No doubt about it, I was in serious trouble. I was fully under the control of my oppressors, and I was charged with a major crime that could carry the death penalty. As a matter of fact, I expected to die. At no time before the trial did I expect to escape with my life. Yet being executed in the gas chamber did not necessarily mean defeat. It could be one more step to bring the community to a higher level of consciousness. I was not trying to be heroic, but I had been preparing myself for death over a long period of time. When the party was first organized, I did not think I would live for more than 1 year after we began. I thought we had been blasted off the streets. I thought we would be blasted off the streets, but I had hoped for that 1 year to launch the party, and any additional time was just a bonus. When I landed in Highland Hospital, I was already living on borrowed time. More had been accomplished in 1 year than Bobby and I had dreamed of when we drew up our 10-point program in the North Oakland Service Center. Despite my legal predicament and the prospect of death, I was not discouraged or unhappy. There would be time to make a few more political statements and to make my ordeal a part of Black consciousness. This was important. For more than 350 years, Black men in this country have been dying with courage and dignity for causes they believe in. This aspect of our history has always been known to Black people, but for many the knowledge has been vague. We knew the names of a few of our martyrs and heroes, but often we were not acquainted with the circumstances or the precise context of their lives. White America has seen to it that Black history has been suppressed in schools and in American history books. The bravery of hundreds of our ancestors who took part in slave rebellions has been lost in the mist of time, since plantation owners did their best to prevent any written accounts of uprisings. Millions of Black school children never learned about two great Black heroes in the 19th century, Denmark Vesey and Nat the Prophet Turner, who died for freedom. I didn't know we used to call Nat Turner the Prophet. We need to bring that back. By the way, if y'all didn't see it, go check out that film, Birth of a Nation, the story of Nat Turner's revolt, all right? And go check out Goodbye Uncle Tom as well. Those are 2 movie recommendations for you. Anyway, white people had good reason to destroy our history. Black men and women who refuse to live under oppression are dangerous to white society because they become symbols of hope to their brothers and sisters, inspiring them to follow their example. In our time, Malcolm X is the supreme example. His life and accomplishments galvanized a generation of young Black people. He helped us to take a great stride forward with a new sense of ourselves and our destiny. But meaningful as his life was, his death had great significance too. A new militant spirit was born when Malcolm died. It was born of outrage and a unified Black consciousness out of the sense of a task left undone. In light of this, I was able to stand back a little and consider my own death. The Black Panther Party had been formed in the spirit of Malcolm. We strove for the goals he had set for himself. When Black people saw Black Panthers being killed not only by the police, but also by the judicial system, they would feel the circle closing around them and take another step forward. In this sense, my death would not be meaningless. After 15 days in Highland Alameda Hospital, my condition improved, and I was transferred to the medical unit on death row in San Quentin. Officially, I was there for my own protection. When the ambulance neared Quentin, the police told me to take a good look at its walls because I was going to be inside them for a long, long time. As my gurney rolled through the halls of San Quentin toward death row, one by one, the guards called ahead, "Dead man, dead man, dead man." No prisoner is allowed to talk to a man bound for death row. The hospital tank at San Quentin is right next door to the psychotic ward. While my cell was well secured, it had 3 locks. Most of the psychotic cells were left open because those inmates became restless in a small space. Out in the hall there were things to keep them occupied: weightlifting equipment, a card table and chairs, some games. One of the mental cases was a Chicano named, I think, Rabilar. Rabilar and I hit it off because he identified with the Muslims, and so did I. All day he would stand outside my cell playing his guitar and singing to me and saying, "Don't you worry now, everything's gonna be all right." Okay, weird. I hope I never go to prison unless I have to go to prison for the cause, for the revolution. I hope I never have to die a young death unless it's for the cause or the revolution. But I'm scared about going to prison and meeting like some weird folks. You know what I'm saying? Just like a Chicano who identifies with the black Muslims and he loves to play guitar and sing Bob Marley. That's what you find behind them walls, boy. That's crazy. I don't want to die though, or go to jail. And I don't suggest anybody else do it unless it's for a noble cause. Continuing here. Rabilar had been in and out of prison all his life. This time, the beef was murdering a former cellmate. Like me, he had defended himself and lost the case, but the death sentence had been overturned when Rabilar was declared incompetent to defend himself. After that, he was brought to the Quentin psychotic ward and locked up. There, he tried to cut his wrist, so they left his cell open and made him a trustee. Rabilar liked to see the doctors dress my wound, and when they came and removed the bandages, he would move from one end of the bed to the other and hover over the doctors, chattering with excitement. On my 3rd day at San Quentin, a new man, a white, was placed in the cell next to mine. We never learned his name, but we knew he was scheduled for release in 6 months. All that day, Rabilar sang to me, and when night came, he slipped into the new man's cell and slit his throat and smashed his skull with the weightlifting dumbbell. Damn, okay, that jumped ahead fast. Damn. Then he went back to his own cell and sang over and over, "Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Poor boy, you're bound to die." He was still singing when I fell asleep about 10. Although it happened right next door, I never knew, and neither did anybody else, until the guards found the new man dead in his bunk the next morning. Damn. Rabilar was finally declared incurably insane. It was his 7th murder. His 4th murder in prison. All the other prison murders had been cellmates. After 2 weeks in San Quentin, I was well enough to leave. They had carried me in, but I walked out. And from Quentin, they took me to the Alameda County Jail in downtown Oakland, where I had been before. This time, I was to stay there 11 months, before and during my trial. Crazy. What a crazy chapter. So in that chapter, Huey is describing, his situation being in the hospital, tortured by the police, and going to jail and witnessing murders behind bars. It's a real ass life, man. It's real life. Anyway, we're going to be reading one more chapter. We're reading one more chapter, a final chapter for our episode 8 of Book Reacts of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. We're jumping down to chapter 25. And it's titled Strategy, and it goes something like this. We begin with a quote from George Jackson. If you know where that's from, if you know where that quote is from, then you're a real nigga. You're a real nigga if you know. George Jackson, 8234519. If you know where that's from, you're a real nigga. But I digress. I'm sorry. Anyway, chapter 25. The hypocrisy of American fascism forces it to conceal its attack on political offenders by the legal friction of conspiracy laws and highly sophisticated frame-ups. The masses must be taught to understand the true function of prisons. Why do they exist in such numbers? What is the real underlying economic motive of crime and the official definition of types of offenders or victims? The people must learn that when one offends the totalitarian state, it is patently not an offense against the people of that state, but an assault upon the privilege of the privileged few. This was said by George Jackson in Blood in My Eye. So, strategy. On November 12, 1967, the Alameda County Grand Jury returned an indictment against me. I was accused of 3 felonies: the murder of Patrolman John Frey, the assault of Patrolman Herbert Haynes with a deadly weapon, the kidnapping of a black man named Del Ross near the scene of the crime, which included my forcing him to drive me in his car to another part of the city. This is supposedly how I got to Kaiser Hospital. Del Ross testified before the grand jury that I and another man had climbed into his car, pointed a gun at him, and told him to drive us to the hospital. But before we arrived at the hospital, he testified we had jumped out of the car and disappeared into the night. Evidence presented to the grand jury included the bullet taken from Patrolman Frey's back, the bullet taken from Patrolman Haynes' knees, Haynes' revolver, 2 9mm cartridge cases that had been found in the street, 2 matchboxes containing marijuana found under the seat of the car I had been driving, various photographs of the cars at the scene, and a Xerox of the Kaiser Hospital records of my emergency treatment. Patrolman Haynes' gun was the only weapon found at the scene. The 9mm casings were not fired from it. In addition to this meager evidence, the grand jury heard the testimony of Haynes, Del Ross, the police officers who arrived at the scene after the shooting, the nurse who had admitted me to Kaiser Hospital, the ballistics experts. It was estimated that 7 shots had been fired on the morning of October 28. Patrolman Haynes had received 3 wounds, and Frey had been shot twice in the thigh and back. A completely flattened slug, which had probably ricocheted off some other surface, was found in a door of Laverne's Volkswagen. The grand jury took evidence after I was removed from San Quentin to the county jail in Oakland. Although severely wounded only a few weeks earlier, I was recuperating rapidly and was strong enough to begin planning the political strategy for my trial. I did not want to deal with the legalities, just political strategy. The number one political decision made by the party was that the attorneys stay out of all political decisions concerning the trial. I needed to know the legal ramification of any move, of course, and I would not question them, but legal niceties were definitely secondary. The ideological and political significance of the trial was of primary importance. So very revolutionary right there for Huey to say. He's saying, listen, of course I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be on death row. I don't want to be executed by the state. And I'm going to listen to my lawyer. But what comes first and foremost is the party, is the politics of it all. If I have to take a plea deal where I say I murdered this police officer when I didn't, would that be politically expedient for the movement? Or if I'm found guilty, you know what I'm saying, is it right to appeal, et cetera, right? There are several other motivations for Huey in this case other than just his own freedom, which I find to be very, very inspirational. You know what I'm saying? He's not thinking just about himself. So by political strategy, I mean this, says Huey P. I wanted to use the trial as a political forum that having to fight for my life was the logical and inevitable outcome of our efforts to lift the oppressor's burden. The Black Panthers' activities and programs, the patrolling of the police, and the resistance to their brutality had disturbed the power structure. Now it was gathering its forces to crush our revolution forever. Public attention was assured. Why not use the courtroom and the media to educate our people? To us, the key point in the trial was police brutality, but we hoped to do more than articulate that. We also wanted to show that the other kinds of violence poor people suffer, unemployment, poor housing, inferior education, lack of public facilities, the inequity of the draft, were part of the same fabric. If we could organize people against police brutality, as we had begun to do, we might move them toward eliminating related forms of oppression. The system, in fact, destroys us through neglect much more often than by the police revolver. The gun is only the coup de grace, the enforcer. To wipe out the conditions leading up to the coup de grace, that was our goal. The gun and the murder it represented would then fade away. Thus, for the Black Panther Party, the goal of the trial was not primarily to save my life, but to organize the people and advance their struggle. Our goal was not to save my life because I had accepted what I thought was a certain fate. They would kill me. Everything we did in the next 11 months was predicated on my death. Everything we did in the next 11 months of my trial fighting this body was predicated on my death. My life had to come to an end sometime, but the people go on. In them lies the possibility for immortality. The dialectic teaches that all men long for immortality, and this longing is one of the contradictions between man and nature. Man tries to resolve the certainty of death through reversal by bringing it under control, which is a form of the will to power. But since each man eventually gives up his life, death can be controlled only through the ongoing life of the people. Because I saw my death growing closer, I often wondered how I would prepare for it. A person never knows how he will act prior to the experience itself. Knowing that the most valuable thing anyone has is his life, I could not be sure in what way I would give it up, particularly under the threat of the gas chamber. I had faced death before, but under different circumstances. There had been a spontaneity and a suddenness in each confrontation, and the possibility of outwitting death. But when the state kills you, there are no odds. The inevitability of death is absolute. To face execution by the state demands a special kind of courage, the ability to act with grace and dignity in a totally degrading situation. It is the ultimate form of truth. That's a man right there, baby. That's a man right there. For real, for real. That's a man, for real. He said, when you face the state, you know you're facing death. For real. And if you're able to take that capital, if you're able to face a capital with your head held high, that's how you know what the truth is. That's how you separate the wheat from the chaff. That's a man right there, for real. Anyway, the first defense strategy that Charles Gary decided upon was a series of pretrial motions in state and federal courts questioning the validity of grand juries to prove that my indictment was both illegal and unjust. Gary not only presented arguments against the composition of grand juries, which rarely represent a cross-section of the community, but also maintained that the system itself is unconstitutional. Okay, that's my first slip up of the day. First slip up. We've been reading for close to 2 hours, so I'm proud about that. Gary not only presented arguments against the composition of grand juries, which rarely represent a cross-section of the community, but also maintained that the system itself is unconstitutional. An indictment by a grand jury, he argued, imperils the right to a fair trial. In a grand jury hearing, which is always held in secret, the defendant and his lawyer are not present. Evidence against the accused is presented to the jury by the district attorney, but no cross-examination is allowed, and no evidence can be introduced by the defendant. While it is true that grand jury testimony is inadmissible at trials, the fact that the transcript of a grand jury hearing can be published by the press offers little chance of public impartiality toward the accused. Public opinion can be greatly influenced by these transcripts, especially since all evidence and testimony are presented at the discretion of the district attorney, who is out to prove the defendant's guilt. So it hardly seems fair that a trial jury can then be selected from citizens who have heard or read the evidence that was responsible for an indictment. After all, an indictment means only that the grand jury felt there was enough evidence of guilt to bring the accused to trial. If you don't know, in America, the grand jury system is how they, charge most people, right, with felonies, right? They have to take it to the secret jury, as he just explained. I've never seen grand jury testimony published in a newspaper or in other media outlets. I don't know if since 1970, when this was published, if they've passed a law that makes that impossible, because I haven't seen it done. But he makes a very good argument there why grand juries are unconstitutional or make having a fair trial impossible. But think about Diddy. In Diddy's situation, for example, right? The whole world knew who he was. He was one of the most famous people on the planet before he was officially charged by the federal government for the crimes he was accused of. Everybody had already heard the stories, right? Because of the lawsuit from Cassie. So finding a fair and balanced jury will always be a challenge, whether you publish the grand jury testimony or not. You know what I mean? But I digress. There's a lot of reforms that need to happen in the criminal justice system. Continuing here. So let me just check real quick how many more pages we have left. I just want to check real quick. Just checking. Okay, so we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Six pages. We have 6 more pages to go in this text before we're wrapping it up for the night. If you have any comments you want to say to me, put them in the comment section right now. I will try to read them before we wrap it up for the night. 6 more pages. So, after filing briefs that question the constitutionality of the grand jury system, Gary turned to the inequities in the trial system itself. He and his staff did research on how jurors are chosen to serve. Alameda County, like most of the country, selects its juries from the county voter registration list. And there, as elsewhere, the number of registered voters from black communities is far smaller than those from the white population. Furthermore, if selected for jury duty, many black people have legitimate reasons for declining. Economic hardship and inconvenience are involved. Because of this, few members of minority groups are available to decide the fate of their peers. Again, Gary raised the question of whether, under these circumstances, a black man can receive a fair trial in America. From November until the following July, when my trial began, Gary was busy and overworked. Filling these motions in the California courts, 9 months is an exceptionally long time between indictment and trial. The delay in my case was not only inevitable because of the time-consuming pretrial hearings, but desirable. The media had made me a celebrity through television and hysterical newspaper accounts. The death of a policeman always incites a large percentage of the population to cry vengeance. Many people believe I was guilty. Then, too, the Oakland police were in a state of frenzy. On October 17th, less than 2 weeks before the Frey shooting, they had once again demonstrated their brutality at a protest rally of 4,000 demonstrators in Oakland. That day, they attacked the demonstrators so viciously and with so little provocation that the entire media, even William Nolan's Tribune, criticized their behavior. That day became known as Bloody Tuesday. As a result, the police were very much on the defensive and anxious to vindicate themselves. To do this, they had to keep demonstrating how threatened they were, particularly by the Black Panthers. Their attacks on the brothers increased. At one point, David Hilliard was arrested on the street for handing out leaflets about my case. As far as I know, leafleting has never been against the law. At any rate, Gary wanted emotions to subside to improve my chances for a more objective trial. While the police were stepping up their harassment of the Black Panthers, other people in the Oakland area were rallying to help me. The party decided that a broad base of support would be necessary in order to win allies and raise funds for my defense. So in December, the Black Panther Party announced a coalition with the Peace and Freedom Party. The organization was made up of mostly young whites who opposed the war in Vietnam and who also felt that the party system was no longer working. They saw a need for a third party that could run strong anti-war leaders in the 1968 national election, as well as combat the evils in our society. I love how, so far in this text, Huey didn't even really mention the Vietnam War because he already knows it's a given that the Vietnam War is a farce. You know, going over to Vietnam to kill innocent Vietnamese people is just a part of white supremacy and American hegemony. I love that up to this point, the Vietnam War has barely been mentioned as far as I can remember. And that just, I love it that it's just understood. Guys, you know where we at. I ain't even got to say it, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, I'm going to continue here. So, they saw a need for a third party that could run strong anti-war leaders in the 1968 election, as well as combat the evils in our society. Ultimately, when the Peace and Freedom Party became a legal party in most states, Eldridge was its candidate for president, along with Jerry Rubin for vice president. But mainly the alliance between the Black Panthers and the Peace and Freedom Party was meant to demonstrate that racism and police oppression were responsible for my being in jail and that I was falsely accused of the murder of Patrolman Frey. The phrase, "Free Huey," was created out of this coalition. It became a rallying cry for people who believed in my innocence. Give a shout out to Corn 1999 up in the chat. Shout out to Corn for joining the conversation. Continuing here in Huey P. Newton's memoir, Revolutionary Suicide, chapter 25. Meanwhile, all across the country, people were relating to my imprisonment. The Black Panthers were recruiting members in every major city and also in some of the rural areas. In some cases, people just formed a group and called themselves Black Panthers without even getting in touch with central headquarters. Sometimes groups would form around our 10-point program and use another name. It was all the same. The community was becoming educated, their consciousness was being raised. We were also gaining international attention. Soon, groups in other countries began to ask us to send speakers. At that time, we still considered ourselves revolutionary nationalists, that is, Black nationalists who took a revolutionary position in the United States. We had not as yet developed an international policy, but some Black Panthers made trips out of the United States to explain our position and describe the nature of American oppression. One of these trips was to Japan, where a group of revolutionary Japanese students, Zengakuren, invited the Black Panthers to speak at a number of conferences organized by left-wing students. We chose Kathleen Cleaver, whom Eldridge had recently married, and Earl Anthony, a Black Panther, to make the trip. Earl was a party member from Los Angeles with a college degree. Even though the Los Angeles chapter had some problems with him, he was considered competent and articulate enough to speak for the party. However, in Hawaii, both Kathleen and Earl experienced some delay in getting their visas cleared by the Japanese consulate. Kathleen decided to return to California, and Earl went on by himself. That's so crazy. In Japan is always, okay, I know I did my top 5 whites earlier. I just want to give an honorary mention to Japan. I'm giving an honorary mention to Japan. Here's a little known Black history fact. There were some Black men that were training during World War II for the Japanese to invade America, and they were doing military drills to help the Japanese invade America should the Japanese ever land on American soil to bring the war home. You know what I'm saying? So, little known fact about Japan. And basically, I think Black people in Japan have been like this. Yes, there's a lot of white supremacy and white worshiping in anime, but Japan and Black folks generally are like this. They're in the honorable mention of whites. In the honorable mention of my top 5 whites, Japan is there. Because the first people to reach out to the Black Panthers to want to speak to them internationally were the Zengakuren, revolutionary Japanese students. Anyway, give a shout out to Nasty, Big ENT up in the comment section. Okay, so let's go to Danny Cottingham. Let's go here. Danny Cottingham says, I want to know why the government will not let us have several state Indian land in Tennessee. We got the original document signed by my great-grandfather. A soldier died in 1807 in Tennessee and Indian. That's, the theft of native land or indigenous land is one of the original sins, one of the first crimes that the United States government committed and continues to commit to this day. I am fully in support of land back. I am fully in support of the land back movement to the indigenous people of the United States. So I'm in full support of you, Danny. Shout out to Danny for coming in here and raising a very good issue. I'm going to continuing here. So, when Anthony got to Japan, everything went wrong. Instead of stating the party's position, he presented a personal platform, a strictly white and black line, of how the black world would fight the white world, and that would be the end of it. Oh, Lord. His whole talk was just that simple, the same line Stokely Carmichael was following. He showed no awareness of class issues and did not even try to describe them in terms of this country. To him, the whole problem was a matter of racism, which cried out for separatism. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. I heard a tape recording of some of the Japanese sessions. A friend brought it to me, and I was angered. The Japanese students put Anthony down left and right. They asked good questions, questions that dealt with contradictions in a dialectical way, whereas Anthony was dealing in absolutes. For him, all meaning lay in the white world's oppression of blacks. Certainly, this is much of the problem, but it fits into a larger context. Ironically, it was the Japanese students who stated the party's actual position by pointing out other reasons and circumstances that complicate the black-white situation. Anthony betrayed the purpose of his visit by going on a solo trip and narrowing the possibilities of international solidarity. No wonder the Japanese students were disillusioned with the party. To this day, I do not know whether Kathleen Cleaver had anything to do with Anthony's confusion. She has always been a kind of cultist in her black nationalism, so she influenced him. Kathleen really loved the party, but I doubt that either she or Eldridge ever completely accepted our ideology. Anyway, when we heard the tapes, we were disgusted. The Central Committee censored Anthony and relieved him of all duties dealing with sensitive issues. He went back to Los Angeles and worked with the party for a while, but eventually dropped out and wrote a shallow and opportunistic book about the party. For this, he was expelled. At the time, we needed writers to help our cause, not people on ego trips. Incidents like this are depressing when you are unable to deal with them directly. At the time, since I was the victim of a police frame-up, it was probably best that I remain in prison. In this way, my incarceration was a continual reminder to the outside world of the outrageous tactics of the police. Every day they kept me there, I grew as a symbol of the brutalization of the poor and black, as well as a living reproach to society's indifference to the inequities of the legal system. Free Huey became a powerful slogan, and the words went far beyond me to become a cry for liberation of all blacks. But the 11 months I spent at the Alameda County Courthouse awaiting trial were not easy. The prison routine was deadly, and the food bad, and the guards corrupt. Most of my stay was spent in solitary because I had protested the way prisoners were treated. My cell was 4.5 feet by 6 feet with no window in it, not even the door. Eventually, they did cut out a small hole in the door and covered it with thick wire. It was so swelteringly hot that I often took off all my clothes to get relief. Even breathing was hard work, since there was no ventilation in the cell. A bunk, a wash bin, and a toilet were there, nothing more. I got out only 3 afternoons a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when my family came or when I saw my lawyers. Even visiting was unpleasant. The visiting rooms were tiny cubicles with a steel wall between the prisoners and visitors. You had to talk through a round, screened hole and put your ear to another hole to hear the reply. Usually the babble from other visitors and prisoners made conversations strained. Fortunately, I was able to send letters and tapes out with my lawyers to friends and the party. The tapes were made in the attorney's room. I was never actually out of touch, but never tempted to give up, largely because of the strong support I had, not only from the people, but also from Charles Gary and the attorneys who were working with him on my case. These were Alexander Hoffman, a lawyer active in civil rights cases in the Bay Area, Faye Stender, who was later to be involved in George Jackson's case at Soledad and thereafter, John Escobedo, a Chicano lawyer, and Carlton Ennis, a black lawyer. Later, attorney Edward Keating, the founder of Ramparts magazine, joined the others. The brothers on the outside world worked unceasingly for my defense. They went into black communities in the Bay Area collecting money. They moved onto college campuses and talked to students. They spoke and held forums and organized rallies. When Bobby Seale got out of jail in December, he had been released before the 6 months were up. He worked full-time organizing for my defense. The police never let up on him either, and one night in February, they busted into his apartment and arrested him for having a weapon, which they had planted there. It was such an obvious frame-up that the judge let him off. On February 17th, my birthday, and the next day, 2 huge rallies were held, one in Oakland and one in Los Angeles. Many leaders of the Black Revolutionary Movement in the United States spoke at them, including H. Rap Brown, then chairman of SNCC, and James Foreman, then head of SNCC's New York office. Among them also was Stokely Carmichael, who came to the jail to see me. He had just returned from a trip around the world, to Africa, Cuba, and Vietnam, and a lot of his ideas had changed in a short time. Our visit lasted just long enough for us to disagree. The way Huey P. Newton and Stokely just bicker back and forth is one of the running jokes of this book. My God, I love that sentence. Stokely came back after traveling around the world in 30 days, and his visit to me lasted just long enough for us to disagree. I love that. That's so funny. Anyway, Stokely began by telling me what it would take to get me out of jail. The only thing that would do it, he said, was armed rebellion, culminating in a race war. Okay. I disagreed with him. While I acknowledged the pervasiveness of racism, the larger problem should be seen in terms of class exploitation and the capitalist system. In analyzing what was happening in the country, I said that we would have to accept many alliances and form solidarity with any people fighting the common oppressor. He objected to the Black Panther alliance with the Peace and Freedom Party and said we should not associate with white radicals or let them come to our meetings or be involved in our rallies. Stokely warned that whites would destroy the movement, alienate black people, and lessen our effectiveness in the community. Later, he proved right in terms of what happened to the party, although he was wrong in principle. Soak that up. As a result of coalitions, the Black Panthers were brought into the free speech movements, the psychedelic fad, and the advocacy of drugs, which we were and are dead set against. All these causes were irrelevant to our work, which was concerned with deeper and more fundamental issues, in fact, survival. When these things happened, Stokely warned, whites would try to take the leadership from us. I did not believe him while he was running these things down to me. We were not into a racist bag. I repeat, the Black Panthers, according to Huey P. Newton, were not racist. I told him, and these developments were not inevitable. At the time, I felt sure that Stokely was afraid of himself and his own weaknesses. I responded to his racist analysis with a class analysis. We could have solidarity and friendship in a common struggle against a common oppressor without the whites taking over. But in the 33 months I spent in jail, our leadership did falter, and serious frictions developed between the Black Panthers and white radicals. Not until I got out of jail nearly 3 years later were we able to start putting everything together again. One of my most unhappy moments during the period I was awaiting trial was when I learned of little Bobby Hutton's murder on April 6, 1968. News of the shootout came over the prison radio. I was shocked but not surprised. The police claimed little Bobby was shot trying to escape, but we knew that for the same lie told by Southern sheriffs for years. Black people were not fooled either. A terrible frustration and rage arose in the community. Little Bobby was murdered only 2 days after Martin Luther King's assassination, and the people were still staggering under that blow. After King's death, Police Chief Gaines had canceled all police leaves and doubled the number of occupying troops in our community, which only intensified the sense of anger and despair. With Bobby's murder, tension mounted in Oakland, along with the fear that the Black community would riot. On the morning of April 7th, Charles Gary and Bobby Seale came to see me. Eldridge had been arrested after the shooting, and Gary was going to defend him. He and Bobby were on their way that morning to a press conference at the police station, and they wanted a message for the people. I gave them a tape I had made, urging the people not to riot spontaneously. This would only give the police an opportunity to continue the massacre. The people should arm themselves for protection when the police moved in to brutalize them, but not make themselves targets for defenseless slaughter. Charles Gary delivered my message at the press conference and also made a statement to the media about the deliberate murder of little Bobby Hutton. Of course, Police Chief Gaines exploded at that and accused Gary on the radio and television of intemperate and false statements. However, a former member of the Oakland Police Department, a Black man, recently confirmed to us in private that little Bobby was murdered outright. He had witnessed the murder that night. Bobby's death really tore me up. I became even more determined to use my trial as an organizing point against these murders. All right, this is going to be the last paragraph we're reading of chapter 25, and that completes all of part 4 of Revolutionary Suicide. If you have any comments you want to say to me, because we got about 12 people in the chat, and who knows how many people are watching anonymously. If you have anything you want me to read, put it in the comment section, and I'll read it before we close this live stream after we read this last paragraph. Final paragraph of chapter 25 of Revolutionary Suicide, Huey P. Newton's autobiography. Meanwhile, Charles Gary was persevering in his motions to challenge the jury selection system. As a matter of fact, his efforts continued right up until the day my trial began. His investigations have had a profound effect on the whole judicial system, and their repercussions can be seen all over the country today. It is largely because of Gary's work that courts all over the country have become aware of a defendant's right to be tried by a jury of his peers. But in the summer of 1968, he was still fighting for his right as the dates of my trial came nearer and nearer. And that's the end of episode 8, Huey P. Newton's book, Revolutionary Suicide. Very interesting reading. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this book. If you haven't read this book, I highly suggest that you pick it up as well. Let's go into the comment section to finish it out. We have 3 comments from Toto Boy. Toto Boy 77 says, "Word and truth, all power to the people." Toto Boy, shout out to you. Shout out to Danny Cottingham. He says, anybody I can contact to get some information spread to the Cherokee Indian Commissions, because I got the rental state land property deeds. I don't know how to help you with that, Danny Cottingham. I don't know how to help you with that. But I'm sure there are Native American land back movements you can join. You have to look for the organizations of Native Americans who are fighting for land back for Native Americans. So join those organizations and get it popping. And Hermaus Mora says, in this life, you have to justify your existence by any means necessary. That might be the best comment of the night, because that is something I totally agree with. Similar to Nietzsche, we have to have the will to power. There's no good, there's no evil, there's only the will to power, or what Foucault says, the power to define. And we have to have the will to enforce, to mandate, to demand that our humanity be respected and understood. So shout out to Hermaus Mora for that wonderful comment. Let's go to the poll. Very interested to see what the poll says. Kind of scared a little bit, but always happy to see what the people say in the polls. And I don't know what it says yet, because I'm looking somewhere else right now. I'm trying to see something else right now. I'm trying to see the poll on the other channel. Okay, so the poll on the... Nobody's tuned into the other channel, which has the book on the screen. But hey, I guess people like the vertical look. Let's see what the polls say. So would you have voted for Huey P. for president? Most people said no. I think that's because they're right-wingers and white supremacists, and we have a lot of those in the comment section. I don't know why the white supremacists want to support this radical black content a lot, but they're more than welcome to. But fuck Donald Trump got a lot of votes as well, so I'm very happy about that. But out of 79 votes, hey, there could have been more. But 0 votes on the other channel. So that's the end of episode 8. Hopefully you enjoyed it. All power to the people, and peace.